In this episode, we talk about Manish Sisodia getting bail in the excise policy case after 17 months. We also talk about how several international drugs will no longer be required to undergo clinical trials in India. But first, we talk about the changes that the government has proposed to the Waqf law and the reason why it's drawing strong criticism from the opposition parties. Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week, the government tabled the Waqf Amendment Bill, which proposes sweeping changes to how Waqfs are governed and regulated at the moment. The bill has been severely criticized by the opposition parties and the Muslim community, who have called the bill unconstitutional, anti-minority, and divisive. Now, before we go ahead, let's first understand what a Waqf is.
So the concept of Waqf comes from Islamic laws.
That's Indian Express's Asad Rehman, who has been reporting on the bill for the paper.
Which basically means that it's a religious charitable organization that is created by someone. So say for example, someone owns a piece of land or owns a building, which could be of any nature. And they say that they want to make it into a Waqf. Now, why would they do that? That's because they would do something like this for the greater good of the society. And also because as per Islamic law, it's supposed to be a good deed. So if you are constituting a Waqf, you are doing it for charitable purposes, but also for religious gains. By religious gains, I mean that you want the concept of sawab in Islam, which in Hindi translates to punya. So it's somewhat that concept that it's considered a good deed, and that is why you convert a property into a Waqf.
And Asad, when a property becomes a Waqf, who does that property belong to?
It belongs to God as per the laws. It belongs to God after that, and no human being can claim ownership of a property which is being declared a Waqf. Then how is it managed is another question. A mutawalli is appointed for a particular Waqf. That mutawalli essentially is a caretaker. Is a supervisor, caretaker, or a manager, you can say, who manages that property and manages its affairs, and it is used for the society's overall betterment. It is used by those who are in need of that. Say, for example, an orphanage. Many orphanages are run on Waqf properties under the principle of the Waqf Act. Majority of Waqf properties in India are mosques. So there is a mutawalli for a mosque, which is the mutawalli for the Waqf property, and that mutawalli manages the daily affairs and the overall management, the upkeep and the donation collection, and then the usage of that donation for the betterment of that particular Waqf property. So these Waqf properties are then managed by Waqf boards, with mutawallis acting as their representatives for specific Waqf properties. So then the larger body is called the Waqf board, whereas the smaller body is the mutawalli, and maybe in cases of very big Waqf properties, multiple people working under the mutawalli.
And Asad, the reason, of course, we are talking about Waqf properties is because the government has now proposed sweeping changes to how these properties are regulated. Talk about what some of these changes have been.
So under the proposed bill, which is still on hold, and I'll talk about that in a little while, the bigger changes include that this Waqf bill, if it is passed in its current form, will give a lot of power to the district collector, or where it is called the district magistrate. So the district magistrate will become the final arbiter in matters of Waqf. So far, how this system under the Waqf Act of 1995, how this works is that these disputes related to Waqf properties go to tribunals. Now, these tribunals have one judge, one official, and one person with Islamic knowledge. These tribunals then decide a matter, and then if someone still has a problem with the decision of a tribunal, then they can approach a high court or the Supreme Court. Now this new bill, it proposes that the tribunal system will be removed and that the district collector will become the arbiter. Then the district collector becomes the arbiter in cases where government or government bodies are in conflict with Waqf boards over specific properties. So, for example, say if the Delhi Development Authority in Delhi has a dispute with a Waqf board over a specific property, then in the case of that, the district collector of that particular district will decide whether it should go to the DDA, which is the Delhi Development Authority, or whether it should go to the Waqf board.
And Asad, are there a lot of Waqf properties that are currently under dispute?
Yes, there are multiple, because see, the Waqf rules so far, there are certain Waqfs which are Waqf by nature because they are Waqf by usage. So, for example, a mosque has been used for 100 years as a mosque and people go there and offer namaz every day. Then that is a Waqf property. Then there's no written paperwork, but because it is by use of Waqf property, it is considered a Waqf property. Now, this new bill also says that unless there is a deed for a specific property denoting it to be a Waqf property, it will not be considered a Waqf property unless it is decided by the district collector. Now, this is where the problem that the opposition and All India Muslim Personal Law Board and other Muslim organizations have raised. That essentially they are saying that the district collector is appointed by a state government. Now, if a person appointed by a state government is ruling on a case where one of the parties is the state government or one of its bodies, like I gave the example of the DDA, then their apprehension is that in most cases, the district collector is going to rule in favor of the government body. So they are saying that it is not going to be independent. And there are multiple Waqf properties across India which are in dispute right now.
Right, and even the introduction of a deed is something that is being called contentious by a lot of Muslim organizations. Could you talk about why that is?
So they say that there are lots of Waqf properties which have been declared Waqf orally by a person. So for example, if a person is very old and he or she has a huge tract of land or a building and he or she say that, okay, I'm going to denote this as a Waqf property and it is now going to be used as an orphanage for children or as a mosque. So after the person's death, there is no paperwork, but the Waqf has been declared orally and that building is being used by a Waqf board for an orphanage and there is a mutawalli appointed by the person who has given up that property. So in that case, any person can come and raise an issue that, this property is not a Waqf. And because there is no legal paperwork to back that claim that it is a Waqf, there will be multiple disputes that will come out in case this bill is passed, because there are lots of Waqf properties across the country which have been denoted as Waqf properties either orally or by use. And the new bill removes both these clauses. So that is something that is a major change.
Right, and these are only some of the changes that have been introduced. But the other big thing that is being proposed is that now even non-Muslims can be part of Waqf boards. Talk to us about that proposal.
So under the new bill, if it is passed in its current form, so far the rule was that there used to be some parliamentary members in the Waqf Council and Waqf boards. They would either come from the parliament or the state legislature. So far, it was a compulsion to have Muslim members, but that provision has been removed, will be removed if this bill passes in its current form, which looks unlikely. So any parliamentarian who has to be part of a Waqf council or a Waqf board or a legislator who has to be part of it has to be Muslim so far. Now, one of the main contentious issues in this was that the Muslim organizations were saying that, are you going to let a religious affair be managed by someone who is not even from the particular religion, which is Islam in this case? are you going to have interference from people who are not from within the religion, and that this is against the constitution because the constitution gives us the right to manage our religious affairs within the community. So that parliamentarian rule was proposed to be changed under the new bill. Then also the government also opened the door for having non-Muslim chief executive officer, which is nominated by the state government in a Waqf board, who manages the administration of Waqf boards and Waqf properties. Now, so far, the mandatory rule was that you must have a CEO, chief executive officer, has to be a Muslim, but that provision would have been done away with if this bill was passed in its current form.
And Asad, now tell us how the opposition parties have reacted to this bill, and do BJP's allies support it?
So now, initially when reports came out that this bill is going to come, there was widespread opposition from not just opposition parties, but Muslim organizations as well, that this is against the constitution and that this is against the concept of federalism and that it's going to become very centralized. So when this bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha, the opposition parties, including Congress, Samajwadi Party and NCP led by Sharad Pawar, all opposed this bill, saying that it is against the constitutional spirit.
This bill patently violates the principles provided in Article 14, 15 and 25, so it is both discriminatory, arbitrary. It is a grave attack on the basic structure of the Constitution as it violates the principle of judicial independence, separation of powers. Sir, one thing has to be understood, that the Waqf management of a property is an essential religious practice for a Muslim. By denying legal recognition to Waqf al-Awlad under Clause 4 and Waqf by user under Section 3R1, government has sought to severely restrict how Muslims can manage their Waqf property. Sir, in fact, Hindu endowment...
Let's come to the BJP and its allies. While the BJP is the one, the government led by the BJP is the one who introduced this bill, most of their allies, JDU, one of its key allies, was in complete support of this bill. TDP, the Telugu Desam party, supported the bill and said that we support the bill, but at the end also said that they would not mind if it goes to a parliamentary committee for reconsideration and scrutiny. Then Chirag Paswan's LJP, which is a Bihar party, did not make its stand clear and abstained from the discussion on the bill, giving the BJP a problem. Because this bill or any bill now can only be passed by this government with the help of its allies, because the BJP does not have an absolute majority anymore in the Lok Sabha. They have 240 seats, and to make the majority mark, they need at least another 30-35 seats, MPs to vote in favor. So while they might have passed the bill if they had tried to, but the government agreed that it will send it to a parliamentary committee for reconsideration and discussion, and after speaking to the stakeholders, they will make an informed decision about the bill, and that whether it is scrutinized and altered and brought back or whether it is not brought back, that's we'll know in the future. But for now, the parliamentary committee has just been formed. There are multiple Congress members who are there. There are other parties. The Samajwadi Party has representation in the parliamentary committees, which comprises of MPs. There are multiple BJP members who are part of there, led by Mr. Kiran Rijiju, who is the minority affairs minister and as well as is the parliamentary affairs minister also. So he is also part of the committee. So this committee is now going to discuss the bill, make changes, and whatever happens we'll know in the future. But this is how largely the politics around this bill has so far evolved in the last few days.
And next we talk about Manish Sisodia, who on Friday walked out of Tihar jail after more than 17 months.
सारे परिवार वालों को जो यहाँ आए हैं, जो इतने दिन से, जो 17 महीने से मेरी बहना खुड़ी ये सब लोग कष्ट उठा रहे थे.
The senior Aam Aadmi Party leader and the former Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi is an accused in the Delhi excise policy case and was granted bail last week by the Supreme Court, which said that there is not even the remotest possibility of the trial being concluded in the near future. In this segment, Indian Express's Mallica Joshi joins us to discuss what his bail means for the Aam Aadmi Party. Mallica, can you begin by telling us what exactly Sisodia has been accused of?
So when the CBI first registered a case in the Delhi excise policy, he was one of the prime accused out of the 15 against whom the preliminary FIR was launched. He's been accused of tweaking the policy in a way that would have benefited some private players. That is the main allegation against him, which essentially translates into corruption. And based on the CBI case, the Enforcement Directorate then filed a case of money laundering against him, where he's also an accused in that case.
Right, and when it comes to the excise policy case, we know, of course, that Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal is also an accused and continues to be behind bars because of it. Now, he had gotten bail during the Lok Sabha polls mainly for campaigning purposes. But talk about why Sisodia has been granted bail and the observations the court made while doing that.
So, in this plea, the bail is not really based on merits per se, because on merits, the court has earlier rejected his bail. This plea was made, keeping in mind the delay in trial, as Manish Sisodia's lawyers told the court, that it's been 17 months that he's been in jail. The case was lodged sometime in late 2022 and the trial has not yet begun. So, based on the evidence that the court saw and, on the stage of where the investigation is, it said that it was very unlikely that the trial would begin anytime soon. And that is the basis on which he has been granted bail at present.
And Mallica, could you talk about just how important Sisodia is to the Aam Aadmi Party?
So, he was the Deputy Chief Minister of the city and he has always been a very close confidant of the Chief Minister, Arvind Kejriwal. But it's not just that. He's also a very key player in the party. He has an equation with all the MLAs in Delhi. Then again, at one point in time, he was also managing the affairs in Punjab, which is the second state where Aam Aadmi Party has a government. But more than that, at this time, for him to come out of jail, because his was among the first big arrests in the case, and that was in February 2023. And we've seen the Supreme Court earlier say that, there doesn't seem to be much material evidence against him, but he was denied bail after the prosecution said that no, they have found certain things that will be discussed during the trial. So it's been a very up and down sort of a journey for him and for the Aam Aadmi Party. And after the Chief Minister's arrest, there has been a vacuum in the leadership in the party. Of course, Sanjay Singh has also come out on bail. He was also arrested in the same case. But for, Manish Sisodia has been Arvind Kejriwal's sort of co-traveler for a very long time. They've known each other since the early 2000s, and he's also a founding member of the party. So when we look at it from that lens, it's a very, very big sort of an event for Aam Aadmi Party. They are looking at assembly elections in the next 5-6 months. February 2025 is when it's expected. So at a time like this, there was a lot of flux in the party because your leadership is not really there. So his coming out of jail at this time is a very significant moment for them. They will hope that it brings more cohesion to the party.
And now that he has come out, will he be able to become the Deputy Chief Minister again?
Not right now. So when he was arrested, he was the Deputy Chief Minister and he held several other portfolios. But he then resigned a few weeks after being arrested, which means that if he has to be reinducted into the cabinet, it can only be done after the Chief Minister basically recommends his name and he takes oath again. The Chief Minister cannot do that while he is in Tihar jail. He will also have to get bail and he will have to be allowed to conduct official duties. So the Supreme Court did not put any bars on him going to the Secretariat, doing any official work. But just because the Chief Minister is presently in jail, that process cannot be followed. So he can't have a ministerial berth or become Deputy Chief Minister.
And could you talk about the kind of statements he's made since he's come out of jail?
So, one of the first things that he said after coming out of jail was that, I thank the Baba Sahib's constitution. And this has been a recurrent theme in every Aam Aadmi Party leader's speeches over the past few months, where the constitution and upholding the constitution has been a big element of their fight against the opposition, which in case is the BJP.
जो बाबा साहब ने जो सपना देखा था कि कोई तानाशाही सरकार आएगी तो तानाशाही भरे कानून बना के जब नेताओं को विपक्ष के लोगों को जेल में डालेगी तो इस देश का वो संविधान जो बाबा साहब ने बनाया था उनकी रक्षा करेगा.
So So for Manish Sisodia to come out of jail and, almost start his speech with saying that, the constitution is there to guard us and to protect us. Anyone who is being harmed by the dictatorship, he said, will be protected by the constitution. The second thing that was interesting is that, he said that Arvind Kejriwal is going to come out soon because of this constitution. So those are the two key things he said as soon as he came out of jail. Then in his address to his party workers today, again, a lot of it was about how the fight has to go on and how they have to prepare for the assembly elections. Everyone has to stand together and have a joint front against the BJP. He also spoke about other parties which are part of the India Alliance and said that this is not a time that we look at our differences. Instead, we should stand together. And this is in a place where the Delhi units of Aam Aadmi Party and the Congress are not really in tandem. They will be contesting elections separately. There will be no alliance for the assembly polls. So these are crucial statements in that sense.
इस तानाशाही से अगर लड़ना है तो एकजुट होके लड़ना पड़ेगा। ये ना सोचें कि आज आम आदमी पार्टी के कार्यकर्ता और नेता जेल में हैं, कल नंबर आपका भी आएगा, कल नंबर उनका भी आएगा जो दूसरे पक्ष में बैठे हैं या इधर के पक्ष में बैठे हैं, कल नंबर उनका भी आएगा जो इधर नए नए गए हैं कि हम तो इनके साथ हैं। एनडीए के साथियों को भी कहना चाहता हूं उनके साथ जो गए हैं और इंडिया गठबंधन के भी एक एक आदमी को और बाकी सब पार्टियों के साथियों को कहना चाहता हूं, पार्टी की जिंदगी के लिए नहीं, नेताओं की जिंदगी के लिए नहीं, देश के लिए इकट्ठा होकर लड़ना पड़ेगा, देश के लिए इकट्ठा होकर लड़ना पड़ेगा। और आज कह रहा हूं।
And Mallica, could you just talk about the situation that the Aam Aadmi Party finds itself in right now? Because recently we've seen a couple of court orders come out that have not been in the party's favor.
Yeah, so one of those judgments was, of course, Arvind Kejriwal's plea to deem his arrest illegal, which the court had turned down, the High Court. And he's been asked to go back to the lower court to start the process of regular bail. So he'll have to apply for regular bail. But the party has said that they will appeal against the High Court's decision in Supreme Court. So that we'll have to see how that plays out. The second big judgment that actually went against them was that of the appointment of aldermen. This is an issue that was related to the Municipal Corporation of Delhi. So, Aam Aadmi Party won the MCD polls in late 2022. After that, the LG appointed 10 aldermen. So, aldermen are people, who are experts in their field and can give good advice to councillors and to committees to take decisions. All of these 10 people were BJP members, something that Aam Aadmi Party protested against and said that it was being done to, essentially take away any powers that Aam Aadmi Party would effectively have in the House. So, in this case, the Supreme Court reserved its verdict for over a year. And finally, when it was announced, it said that the LG has the right and has the power to select aldermen without the aid and advice and without any input from the government that has to be considered mandatorily. So that gives BJP, of course, an upper hand in the MCD right now. And MCD is a very crucial part of what Delhi is. It provides all cradle-to-grave services for the city. It looks at roads, it looks at sanitation. A lot of roads actually come under your MCD. Some flyovers will come under you. Schools, there'll be hospitals. So it provides a very, very vast area of services. So it is a very crucial government body which AAP had managed to get control of after it was ruled by BJP for 15 years. So it was a big fight for Aam Aadmi Party that they have just lost. So at a time like this, a verdict, a bail order that goes in favor of AAP actually is a very big morale boost for them more than anything else.
And in the end, we talk about how many international drugs will be available in the Indian market much faster. This change is due to a new order by India's drug regulator, which states that if these drugs have already been approved by regulators in 6 specific countries or regions, they will no longer need to undergo clinical trials in India. These countries and regions include the United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, Canada, and the European Union, all of which are known for their rigorous regulatory approval processes. Indian Express's Anonna Dutt joins us to talk about this order and why it has raised concerns. Anonna, tell us, what does this order mean for the international drugs coming into India?
So, first of all, this provision of, exempting local trials is not new. It has been there since the new clinical trials rules came in, I think in 2019. And the rules had a provision which said that the licensing authority could give waiver to drugs which have been approved in certain selected countries. The Wednesday's notification just mentioned the names of these countries and what kinds of, drugs can get approval through this mechanism. So, for example, they have exempted drugs like the ones that are used for rare diseases or the new genetic or cellular therapies mostly used in cancers. They've also got a category for drugs that are needed for special defense purposes. Then, of course, there is an exemption for pandemic. And the last category is the most important one, where they say that any therapy which has a significant advancement over the standard of care, the existing standard of care, will also be exempt from local trials. Which, to some people, that means any and every drug being exempt from, the trials being conducted in India. And that is what they say is the problem.
Right, and talk about the concerns this raises, because during a lot of these clinical trials, you're testing on people with a particular kind of genetic makeup that is confined to a geography. Talk about what happens when that sort of goes out of the window.
So there are drugs which are affected by what kind of genes you have, what kind of enzymes the population produces. It can also depend on what kind of food a particular population is eating, what is their gut microbiome like. So all of these have a role in how the drugs act. It can change the efficacy, it may change the toxicity, it can have several impacts. So, of course, that is important. But the rationale behind allowing drugs to come in without the local trials is that there are very few drugs which are influenced by these attributes. Most of the drugs will work in Indian population the same way it does in the Western population. So that is the rationale. And although it is not mentioned in the order per se, but the officials in the know of the matter and people from the Drug Regulatory Office as well say that, it won't be a blanket approval. It won't be that any drug coming to India would automatically get a waiver if they have an, say, FDA approval. What they are saying is that it would still go through to an expert committee who will take a look and see whether there is any evidence to suggest that it might react differently in the Indian population and then take a call accordingly.
And Anonna, what about the drugs for which trials are already ongoing? Can they reapply and decide not to continue with those trials?
Yes, very much so. So 2 or 3 of the obesity drugs, which are the most exciting segment right now, they are under trial in India and they can choose to just apply for a waiver because they have been approved by the FDA. They have been approved by the European Union, I think UK as well. So they have approvals from multiple regulators which have been allowed by India. So they may choose to get a local waiver.
Right, and because these additional trials won't be required, there is a chance that the prices of these drugs might come down a bit, though there is a lot of uncertainty about that. But tell us, does this happen in other countries as well?
So local waiver for trials is not something new. It is done by other countries as well. Take, for example, United Kingdom, which, after Brexit, they needed to attract these pharmaceutical companies to their markets. And they have, created a mechanism where there is an almost automatic approval for drugs that have been approved by, say, United States, Canada, among other regulators. They have a specified set of regulators as well. Similarly, Australia also does allow for, approvals in other countries to be accepted as basis for its own approvals. But they all have certain criteria that you have to ensure that, certain criteria of products will not get an approval like this. For example, in Australia, it says that the medicine has to be exactly similar and follow the same manufacturing process as it is in the other countries. The demographic details should be similar. So, if one disease affects 5% of population in Australia, it should also be similar in whichever other country has approved the drug.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.